You are listening to That's Not the Finish podcast, a no-holds-barred pro wrestling podcast perfect for getting your wrestling fix. Now get ready to call for the 3 count.
1, 2, 3.
And try not to get DQ'd. Because here are your hosts.
Welcome to another episode of the That's Not the Finish podcast. Today we have another awesome guest here. It is Lufisto.
Hello, I love the podcast name.
Thank you. Yeah, I know, it was pretty creative. We all came up with it together, I think. All right, so we have a couple of some questions that we really thought really hard on. Wikipedia was wrong on one of them.
Wikipedia is wrong on pretty much everything. I tried to fix it, and whoever wrote my Wikipedia went back and deleted every correction I did. I'm like, I think I know what I'm talking about, but hey, yeah, don't go on Wikipedia. It's wrong.
Yeah, forget Wikipedia. I actually went to your website, and that's actually where I came up with some of these questions, which was much more reliable, I must say.
Yes, it is.
So the first question I want to ask you here was, tell us a little bit about your background as a musician and playing. You played in 2 bands when you were a teenager. And also, like, does music still influence you today?
Well, I'll go with the first half of the question. I started playing music. My first love was guitar. My mom got me a guitar after I saw Metallica live, and I really wanted to play guitar. And so she got me a guitar. I started playing guitar. I was about 12 years old. And then I saw, again, because of Metallica, I was deeply in love with Jason Newsted. I thought he was the coolest man on earth, and I'm like, I really want to be like Jason. So I switched to bass, and that's with bass that I started, playing in a band, because nobody had a bass player. So I first started in the band playing bass, and ended up, Hole was a very big band back then with Nirvana, so I started singing the whole songs, and switched to another band where I was the main singer and bass player. And I played until I was 16. When wrestling came into my life, it took everything. It took my time and everything, my passion. So the thing, though, music, does it still influence me today? I think I could live without wrestling today, but I could not live without music. I have a full sleeve for people who know metal music. It's all my favorite bands that influenced me and helped me through difficult times. If you see my arm, I have like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Avenged Sevenfold, The Misfits, and Iron Maiden, which is my favorite band of all time, Megadeth as well. And I need music to work, I need music to drive, I need music to train. Like, I just can't live without it.
Definitely, what I've always been hearing is that music just makes people's worlds go around. It just gives people energy and life in a sense. So music basically it just allows you to power through those hard times.
Oh, I totally agree. When you need that extra power for training, you're gonna listen to music, certain types of music. If you need a good cry because you're going through something, there's gonna be that specific songs that helps you through it. And it will help you through life. Whether it's good or bad moments, music's always there. Totally.
So I must ask you this then: what's your top 3 favorite metal bands?
Well, definitely Iron Maiden, Megadeth for sure, and the third one.
Tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I've always loved Metallica. They're the reason why I started playing music. I really love Avenged Sevenfold today, and Guns N' Roses is literally one of the best shows I've ever seen. I've seen them 2 years ago in Philadelphia. They played a 4-hour sets by themselves, and I was thinking maybe Axl wouldn't be as good as voice with the years, but he totally killed it. So it was my mouth was wide open for a few songs. My favorite song from them is "You Could Be Mine." It's a really hard song to sing, and I'm like, he's not gonna play it. He's not gonna play it, and then starts the song and kills it. So I was like, yeah, these bands are all equally, I would say, important to me.
Avenged Sevenfold too. I saw them live. Amazing.
I love Avenged Sevenfold. I've seen them, I think, 4 times now live, and that's actually last year they were doing a show in Hershey. They had their own show with Volbeat, which was freaking awesome. And then the next day, I drove to Baltimore to see them with Metallica and Volbeat again. They put on one of the best shows, too. They're great.
Definitely, definitely. So I also saw that you were, when you were younger, you were the only girl on a football and baseball team at a very young age. What was that like exactly?
It was like, I would say special because my mom tried to get me into figure skating and dancing, and that didn't last long. Like figure skating, literally, I was like so young, went to one class, I said, this sucks, and then went back, and by 10 I was playing baseball. And yeah, being the only girl, like I would often be put on the bench, and they didn't really want me to play, and I kind of had to push to like try to be on the field. They would put me like in the left or the right field. I'm like, and then one day shortstop was missing. They put me there, and I totally killed it. I'm like, I should have been there but it was kind of I don't know, girls and men's sport back then, it was something not unusual, I would say, so they wouldn't really believe in me.
Yeah, it was like that lack of confidence almost, in a sense that I think a lot of people had back then. So would you say that experience that you had, would you say that it really helped inspire you to get into the more male-dominated world of professional wrestling?
I don't know if it's related, because with wrestling, what really got me into it is my drummer back then was actually watching wrestling, and he's like, you got to see this. This guy's fucking awesome. Sorry, can I swear on this podcast? Because I'm sorry, I just did. It's like, this guy is awesome, and he was talking about The Undertaker. So he had his feud with Yokozuna and was building a casket. It's like, you got to see this, and I got totally, like, intrigued by the character. Like, I was mesmerized by him, and that's how I really started to be involved in wrestling. And what I loved about wrestling was the fact that it mixed sport and also entertainment. And to be a wrestler, you have to be creative. The characters, the costume, the entrance. In every, like, I could find everything I love in that single one thing. And that's why I think I turned to wrestling. But mostly I was told, oh, you're just a girl, that's not for girls, you can't do it, you're too small. I just wanted to prove people wrong. Like and it was the same thing. I think that's where maybe baseball is related, where being the girl, I was pushed away to the side. I was like, not again. Like, I want to be a wrestler, and I'm going to be a wrestler. You won't tell me no this time. So.
And you definitely did prove them wrong. I mean, totally.
I would hope so. I got beat up pretty bad, so I hope it was worth it.
Well, now you can basically go back to those people that doubted you and say, well, now do you want to be beaten up?
Yeah, and most of the people who were telling me that are wrestlers who quit, who never got out of their comfort zone, and, I mean, never got out of their own cities where they were wrestling. So it's like a good, like, for me, it's like, well, I did a little bit more than you did when you told me I wouldn't do anything good. Exactly.
We also seen that you transitioned by quite a few different personas, different gimmicks. How many did you transition between exactly? Do you have like a rough number?
I would say probably 3.5, and you'll see where I'm going within the half. When I started, my name was Lucifer, and I was more of a cocky, more, with the feathers, more like the old school, I want to say the Garvins. You know how Jimmy Garvins was really cocky and flipped his hair and the feathers and stuff. That was the first gimmick. I was a heel. Then I turned babyface. It was more the casual girl next door babyface. And when I went to Japan, that's where number 2 came in, where I became an anime. I was a live action anime for the longest time, and I've ran with it for many, many years, from 2003 to, I want to say, 10 years, pretty much 10 years, even 12, because 2015 is like when I said, okay, that has to stop. I turned 35 and looking like a little doll, like, hee, that's like, I'm past that. I'm like, I'm older now, and I was getting a little bored, and a lot of people, they all had like gimmicks of, cute, not necessarily animes, but it was really close to it or inspired by it, and I wanted to do something else. So I had a doll back then called Peekaboo, and she was my manager, so I decided to kill her in a way. So I slowly began to transition into. Back then I was calling myself the Ronin, because when you go from anime to someone who's, if you read the Japanese books and everything, the Ronin is somebody who lost his master, and it's really, it seems complicated. There was a thought process between the two characters, and I was kind of a baby face, but more serious, but nothing fancy, and that's why I said that's the half and a half, where it's not a character, but it was a transition to when I became the Wounded Owl. Wounded Owl happened when Shine Wrestling. It's like, hey, you need to be heel. We're gonna try something. Here's the mic. Here's what you need to say. Just say it and go ahead. And I completely turned heel, and it gave me like a fresh breath, like my career felt like I needed this. I was getting a little bored with being the goody two-shoe like baby face, and now with this character, like I can do so much. I can be vicious. I can be Wounded Owl comes from wounded from all the years of hardcore of trying to get women's wrestling to where it is today. And an owl is a very quiet bird, but it's also a very dangerous one. So so it's a long process of going into 3 characters and a half.
Which one would you say is your favorite one?
I had a great time being the anime, definitely, but I feel the Wounded Owl it's like, I think everything before led me to this place today, and I just love being there.
Definitely. Sounds really awesome. So we've also seen that you won a lot of titles, like a lot of titles. And you've attained a lot of them in like a lot of different promotions as well. Which ones would you say are the most prestigious to you?
One that will always be special to me is definitely the CCW Iron Man Championship, because it is a major male title. I had male titles before, but this one, CCW, was a mainstream independent wrestling, and for them to put a girl up front and beating none other than Mr. Wrestling Kevin Steen, for them to put that trust in me, it will always have a special place in my heart. Definitely, more recently, Shine Wrestling has made me the longest reigning Shine champion, so this one is also special for me.
Awesome. A lot of achievements right there. So out of all the countries that you've been to and wrestled in, which one did you enjoy the most?
You would have asked me that a year ago, and I probably wouldn't know, but now I do have a definite answer. Germany. Germany is my favorite place in the world. I work for WXW when I'm there, and I just love this place. It's so professional. The fans are just awesome. They have a trust in me that I don't even have myself. Last time I was there, I participated in their tournament. It's called the Femme Fatale tournament. My 3 opponents, because I went to the finals, were Toni Storm, Killer Kelly, and Miko Satomura. So that was a awesome time for me. I got to wrestle also Wesna Busick and Chris Wolf. So yeah, I love Germany. They treat me very well.
That's also perhaps one of the best lineups I've actually heard of. Miko Satomura, Tony. Wow.
It is a great lineup, and when you look even at their male competitors, you got Walter, you got Timothy Thatcher, you got Jonathan Gresham, you got David Starr, Absolute Andy. There's so much talent in one place at the same time.
Definitely. Yeah, WXW looks really interesting, really great talent over there. German indie scene is really booming too. So going back to a little bit of your history, we've also learned that you actually had ASD, arterial septal defect.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So what were some of the difficulties of going through wrestling training and shows while you had it before you got it fixed up?
Here's the thing, I didn't know I had it. It's a condition that you're born with. It's a birth defect where there's a hole in your heart. Your heart is separated in 2, and there's that line in the middle of tissue, and mine had a hole of 20 millimeters. And I didn't know I had one, but I never had a second breath, and I didn't know why. And then one day what happened is I had it was almost like a stroke, but not a stroke, because when you have a stroke, you leave a scar, and I wouldn't be able to wrestle. But it was like the same effect. And that's like, that's strange, because there's nothing on your brain. There's clearly something like a clot or something that moved. So that's when they actually did a test where they went with a camera down my throat. Please, people, try to avoid that. It's the worst thing I ever had done, like on a medical sense. It's terrible. And that's where they found I had a hole, and it was a birth defect. I was born this way. So they finally fixed me, and now it's like, second breath, what is that? Feels great. But I didn't know I had that problem before.
Oh, interesting. But glad that it got fixed up, though.
Me too.
So I actually saw a lot of your matches when you were on the tag team circuit with Jordan Grace, actually. So what was it like teaming up with her and also defeating some teams such as LAX?
Jordan and I, it started like almost as I would say a joke, because we had a match and fans were raving about it online. People was like, oh my god, look at those two pogs, like they're so awesome. I'm like, what is a pog? So I went online and looked it up. I'm like, oh god, okay. So Beyond Wrestling's like, you guys are so popular because of that match. So you put them together, and me and Jordan, we have such a great chemistry. A lot of people think we're like related, that she's my younger sister or my daughter. Jordan's actually as old as my wrestling career. But yeah, there's just a natural chemistry between her and I, and it's just, everything is right. You meet those people like that where as opponents or as partners, it just click, and me and Jordan, that's what's happening. And we had great matches with I'm thinking Doom Patrol, LAX, the Gentlemen's Club. There's so many. So
yeah, I mean, definitely when I saw you guys tag team, it was just so interesting because you guys had like that perfect chemistry, that perfect synergy going together. So yeah, definitely like your charisma is just matched up so well. So it also seems that, going back to some of the conversations here about death matches, you've seemed really accomplished in the death match scene. You pinned Necro Butcher at the Death Matches 2006, which Wikipedia got wrong. And you also were the IWA's Queen of Deathmatch champion back in 2007. So would you say that death matches are your favorite match stipulation or type of match to go into?
I wouldn't say they're my favorite, because I haven't been involved in the deathmatch scene since 2007, but they definitely something that I really appreciated and learned from. I think there's a right way to do death matches, and like wrestling with weapon is almost an art form, and it was really challenging for me on a pain level, stamina, but also as how can I tell a story within all the gore, within because that matches, like, there's a fine line between hardcore wrestling and garbage wrestling. So I've always tried to make it so I could tell a story. There would be characters and there was something, And some of my favorite matches, like I wrestling Mickey Knuckles always been great, and Necro Butcher is definitely the toughest opponents I ever had.
There's like a really big debate over deathmatch wrestling too. So like, what would you say is like some of the fine lines between like being able to tell like a story with still having like some amounts of like blood or some sort of crazy stuff going on, and like the garbage wrestling?
Well, if you go in there, you're not a trained wrestler and you just hit with stuff, it's not wrestling. If you're an actual wrestler, you know how to wrestle. You go in there and you wrestle with weapons. You do moves with the weapons. You one match that I've seen that comes to mind right now, you got David Starr versus Joey Janela, two really accomplished wrestlers, but they can go in there and they will use weapons with their moves. They will place their weapons in a certain way to put the opponents through in a very the only word that comes to mind is artsy, but I mean, they're great wrestlers, but they apply their wrestling style with, the deathmatch style, and they have great matches.
Definitely. So, like, what were some of your favorite death matches that you were in?
Like I said, Mickey Knuckles, definitely. The Cage of Death, where I was with Zandig, Lobo, and Nick Cage, was something else. I'm still the only woman who ever stepped in the Cage of Death. Mickey Knuckles for the women, for sure. Juggulator was pretty fun, too, up in Canada. My God. I feel it's been so long since I had a death match. It's almost hard for me to remember everybody. But these are definitely ones that stand out for me.
Awesome, interesting. I mean, just going into those brutal matches too. Just that's amazing that you were able to do that. So, what would you say your secret to the longevity in the business is? This was actually a question from one of our followers.
It's really cliche, but I think you need passion, because it's not easy. Most of the time, it's disappointing. You will work hard, but it doesn't guarantee success. But when I go out there and I get into the squared circle, there's no place like it. It's just, I get really fulfilled and I feel accomplished when I can get someone to scream at me or help someone who had a bad week. They come on the weekends and they can chill and enjoy what I do. And for that 15 minutes I'm in the ring, forget their troubles. And I feel like wrestling is almost like a therapy for me and for the fans. So, it's really fulfilling.
Interesting. So we also found out that you highly idolize Bill Nakano.
Oh, I love Bull Nakano. When I was talking about The Undertaker before, what really, really got me into wrestling is because I was watching The Undertaker. Alundra Blaze was taking on Bull Nakano, and through her, I discovered Japanese wrestling. And I thought these women were so tough and amazing. I just wanted to be like them. So yeah, it all started from the Bull Nakano and Alundra Blaze feud. That's where I discovered women's wrestling, that it could be more than what we were seeing, on the TV from America or Canada. There was legit women's promotion in Japan, and they were putting on the best freaking matches. Sorry to say that, but a lot of times better than the guys. And they were great. I love the Kira Kudo, Manami Toyota. There was Bull Ajakong. These were my favorites. And so when I discovered them, that's when I knew that I wanted to be a wrestler. I didn't want to be a manager or valet or something. It's like, no, I wanted to be a wrestler. So when I started in 1997, there was barely women, so I fought really hard so I can wrestle the guys. So people think intergender is new, but no, I was doing it back in 1997 because there was no other women, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. It's like, I'm going to be a wrestler. There's no women, I don't care. I'm going to wrestle the guys.
Yeah, the Japanese style wrestling, I've just noticed that it really was, they really beat the U.S. and the rest of the Western world, I think, to the punch with women's wrestling, because it was just so much more over the top and so much more high caliber than a lot of the Western promotions, not women's and men's, in general. And I feel like that strong style sort of technique that they have just really started to catch on here, and you're starting to see spread a lot more now in the West.
Definitely. I mean, the strong style is something very popular, but yeah, you got to go back to the old, Japanese promotions to see that it was strong style back then there. It just, it moved here.
So I want to ask you, if you were to go back in time, or if Bull Nakano was actually still more active as a wrestler today, do you think you two could main event a wrestling event?
I think so. She was really intense. I think I'm pretty intense. So she could throw me around, and I can pick her up and throw her around too. Not as much as she would throw me around, but it would be an honor and a privilege to be able to face her, definitely.
So how was it to be the first female? There's a lot of accomplishments that you had here as, the first female wrestler to do this and that. How was it to win the ICW provincial. I can't read for some reason. Provincial championship.
What's funny? It's actually not my first male title. I was in beginning of 1998. I won. My God, I don't even know the name of the promotions anymore. I'll have to go back and I wrote down everything, but I can't remember. I blame the chair shots. I was actually a cruiserweight champion before, and then I became provincial champion, which is, to my knowledge, the cruiserweight I won and this one are the two of the first like male championship won by a woman. I also won like main titles. I have 3 of them. But this one we're talking 98, 99, so it's been a long time ago. So back then it was something pretty, it was unusual, and what's funny is that with the provincial championship, that's where the hardcore came in too, because I had a match with, his name was Serge Prou from Quebec, and we started fighting all over the place, in the guardrails, the chairs went flying, and there was almost a riot in the place. And when I won the belt, I was all bloody, covered in blood, and people went nuts. And that's exactly at that moment where I'm like, I can do this. The crazy hardcore matches and stuff, I can do this. I like this. I like the reaction. And I like that people think it's wrong because I'm a woman. They're like, you don't have to do this. You can't do this. You're a woman. I'm like, oh yeah, watch me. So every time I would add more weapons, like more like dangerous. I'm like, we started with chairs, and then there's the tables, and then the thumbtacks, and then the barbed wire. It's like, hey, bring in the lights, and then bringing everything together, glass and all that stuff. So. This one match with the provincial ICW provincial championship is special because all the death matches, they come from that place. It started there. Yeah.
I really loved how you said, like, how people were saying, like, oh, you can't do that. Well, you should just be like, well, I just did. There you go.
Yeah, I just did. There's a riot, but it is what it is.
And when they say, like, oh, you can't do that, just do it again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Back then I got so much heat because, look at the girl. She thinks she's better than us. And the guys I was wrestling, they would punch me so hard and then stretch me and trying to make me believe that I didn't belong, but I stood back up and I wanted to, like, oh, you can't go in the ring with a man. I'm like, yeah, look at me. So they would, like, legit fight me, and I would fight back and stand up, and after each hit, and they were like, okay, maybe that bitch is, she's either crazy or she's really strong or has a lot of endurance.
Just earning their respect, though. I mean, that definitely just took the time.
It was a process. It definitely was a process to learn respect and be seen as an equal, because back then, I mean, women wrestling were an attraction. It was... And sometimes it happened where my opponent wouldn't show up. I wouldn't have an opponent. They were like, oh, you'll wrestle my wife. Like a promoter. I'm like, excuse me? Just to have, excuse me, there's no better expression. Just to have like 2 pairs of tits in the ring. And I was like, that doesn't work. So at one point I even stopped wrestling women because it was too dangerous. They were not trained. They just wanted 2 girls in the ring. I'm like, no, that's like, I broke my wrist and somebody broke my ribs. I'm like, no. And then finally I went to Mexico and I discovered a new, like, it was so many, like, great women wrestlers, properly trained, and then it started booming slowly in the United States and Canada. And I trained some people myself, some women, so, well, now today there's so many women, I can't count them.
So our final question here is, regarding your feud with Mercedes Martinez. So can you tell us a little bit about that? It seemed like you guys had a pretty long feud going on.
Mercedes Martinez is, we call each other wrestling soulmates. I go in there with her and I can just go in there and wrestle. It's like, as I was talking with Jordan, Mercedes and we have that connection, that chemistry, that everything is right, and Mercedes so good too. We had a feud that it went to WSU, Femme Fatale in Canada, Shimmer, like it went all over the place. And she's one of those opponents where if you ask me, hey, who can you have a good match with? Mercedes Martinez definitely, one of the first name that comes to mind. She's, my wrestling soulmate.
Awesome. So that was a really, really awesome interview. Thank you so much for coming on, Lufisto.
Thank you for having me.
We'll catch you next time on the next episode of That's Not the Finish.